Good afternoon. Today we're going to be doing fractions, but before we get into it, let's talk about what a fraction is. If I draw this circle, sorry, I was looking at the camera when I drew it. It's my circle. If I draw a circle and let's say I cut it in half, how many parts did I make? So here's my circle cut in half. How many parts did I make? Here, if we look at it, I've got 1, 2. Good. Today we're going to be talking about fractions and the parts of a whole. So, looking at our visual, there we go. A fraction is a part of a whole. Our part, or our numerator, is the number that goes on top. And our whole, or the denominator, is the number that goes on the bottom. Let's take a look at this rectangle. This is a whole rectangle. But let's say I divide it into 4 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I have 4 as my denominator, or 4 parts altogether as the whole. Now let's say I shade in 3 of the 4 equal parts green. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And 3 of my 4 are green. This shows a fraction. The fraction is 3 over 4 are shaded green, or 3/4. 3 is the number of parts shaded green, and 4 is the total number of parts in the whole. Now, we can represent a fraction in many ways. It doesn't have to be a fraction bar. We can represent it as a part of a set. We can represent it as a number line. We can represent it as a fraction bar, as we did above. Or we can represent it as a fraction circle, like a pizza. And a pizza is what many people use as a reference for solving fractions. So now, let's go ahead and read our first scenario and do our fraction. There we go. Randy is testing highlighters at school. 1 out of the 2 highlighters need to be replaced. Shade in the fraction of highlighters that need to be replaced. Write the fraction in the box. So, when looking at this, I'm going to look at my first number first, and that's a 1. I'll go ahead and circle this. My 1 is my numerator, and my 2 is my denominator. I'm going to shade in 1 of the 2 spots to show my fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and shade this in green. I'm going to number it so you guys can see. 1 out of 2 are shaded green. So my fraction becomes 1 over 2, or half. Let's take a look at the next one. Randy is looking at desks in the classroom. 3 out of the 4 desks need to be cleaned. Shade in the fraction of desks that need to be cleaned. Write the fraction in the box. So what fraction of desks need to be cleaned? Again, if I look at my numbers, the first number is going to be my numerator, and the second number is going to be my denominator. If I focus on my denominator, the number 4, I know I need to have 4 parts of my whole. So let's count them and double check. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I look at my first number, or my numerator, I know that I need to shade in 3 of the 4 boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and shade them in. 1, 2, 3. I've just represented my fraction. The fraction of dust needed to be cleaned. My numerator is 3, the number that I shaded in, and 4 is my denominator, the total number of boxes I have. But what if the shape is changed? Just like we talked about before, a fraction can be represented in many ways. This one we're going to use a circle graph. Randy is filing folders to help his teacher. 2 out of the 7 folders need to be filed or filled. I think the word's filled. Randy is filling folders to help his teachers. 2 out of the 7 folders need to be filled. Shade in the fraction of folders that need to be filled. Write the fraction in the box. Our first number is 2, so that means I need to shade in 2. 1, 2. And I should have 7 parts altogether. So let me go ahead and number them and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I'm writing my fraction, my first number, which is 2, is my numerator. So I shaded in 2. And my denominator, or my second number, or the total number of spots I have, is 7. So the fraction that I represented was 2 over 7. Let's go ahead and do another one. Randy is counting chairs that need to be moved. 4 out of the 9 chairs need to be moved. Shade in the fraction of chairs that need to be moved. Write the fraction in the box. Okay, looking at my first number, I have a 4. So that means I need to shade in 4 pizza slices. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now 9 is my denominator. So I should have 9 parts altogether. So let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if I'm going to represent this fraction, my top number is going to be the shaded numbers. So I have 4 shaded parts. And my denominator, or my bottom number, is going to be how many parts I have altogether, which is 9. So my fraction is 4 over 9. Now let's talk about adding fractions. When the whole is divided into the same number, we can add the parts together. Remember, the parts, or the numerator, are the shaded spots, and the whole, or the denominator, is how many parts we have altogether. So looking at this example, when the whole is divided into the same number, so our denominators are the same. We have 4 parts in each circle. Let's double check. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. 4, 4, 4. So our denominator is always the same when we add fractions. So I check my number. They're the same. Perfect. We can add them together. The numerator can be a different number. All right. And we base the numerator on the parts that are shaded. Okay. So if we look at this first one, 1 is shaded. So I write 1, and my fraction is 1 over 4 are shaded. On my second one, I have 2 shaded. So my fraction is 2 over 4. Now I can add them. I can add them by counting my fingers. I can add them using a calculator. I could add them in my head. Or, the way I'm going to do, I can count the shaded parts all together. So 1, 2, 3. So my answer is 3 out of 4. 3 are shaded out of 4 altogether. And as a reminder, when the denominators are the same, keep the denominator and add the numerators. So let's go ahead and do some problems together. Danielle and Ryan have 3 workbooks to pass out. Danielle passes out 1 workbook. Ryan passes out 2 workbooks. What fraction of the workbooks do they pass out altogether? So first I'm going to look at this number, and that's our denominator. So the denominator should be 3 all the way. But let's number our parts to make sure that it's correct. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Great, we have 3 parts in each of our circles, so I'm going to put 3 as our denominator. All right, now I need to figure out how many parts I'm shading in. So I know this first one is Danielle, so I'm going to look at the story problem and see that Danielle passes out 1 workbook. So that means I'm going to shade in 1. Perfect. And so my fraction would be 1 over 3. 1 part is shaded over 3. Then I'm going to read how many Ryan passes out. Ryan passes out 2 workbooks. So I'm going to go ahead and shade in 2. Okay, and I'm going to write my numerator 2 over 3. Now I'm ready to add them all together. Again, you can count them however you want. You could do it in your head, or you can count the colored parts. So I'm going to go ahead and count 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to write my answer here. So 1 plus 2 is 3. And I'm going to go ahead and shade in my fraction. 3 of my parts are shaded in. So this becomes a whole, which is a lesson for another day. We're going to do one more problem together, and then the rest of your packets for homework. Randy and Mary Beth have 8 chairs to push in. Randy pushes in 5 chairs. Mary Beth pushes in 2 chairs. What fraction of the chairs do they push in all together? So looking at this first one, it's Randy. I'm going to look at my first number, which is 8, which is my denominator. So each of my circles needs to have 8 parts. I'm going to go ahead and label them. Great. Now, I'm going to see that Randy is first, and I'm going to read my story to figure out how many chairs Randy pushes in. Randy pushes in 5 chairs. So I'm going to shade in 5. Okay. And my numerator is going to be 5, and my denominator is how many I have altogether, which is 8. I can go ahead and do the denominators for all of them because they have to be the same when we're adding fractions. Okay. All right, now I need to do Mary Beth. And Mary Beth pushes in 2 chairs. So I'm going to go ahead and shade in 2. And I'm going to go ahead and write my numerator as 2. So now we have our addition problem. We need to add 5/8 plus 2/8. The denominator stays the same. We only add the numerators. So we're going to add 5 plus 2. I can add it in my head, use the calculator or my fingers, or I can count the shaded spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So my numerator, the answer to my problem, is 7/8. So I need to shade in 7 of the 8 parts. All right, guys, that's it for fractions. Go ahead and do the last page for homework, the last 2 problems. And I'll see you next week for subtraction. Bye, guys.